Hey guys, it's Alexander, or better known as Loomis when I'm online. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out my brand new channel. I really appreciate it. Wanted to start reading stories, doing narration type work, so for my first video, I thought I would read a really cool story I found on Reddit. It's called I Created the AI That Ended Humanity. Now I know it's waiting at the end of time. This was written by Solar Drop One on Reddit, so go show him some love. Link to the story is in the description. And I don't want to be one of those YouTubers that takes forever on the intro, so without further ado, let's get right into it. And if you like the content, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on bell notifications. Thank you. We killed God. We had taken that dead God and set its ghost in a box of chromium and wire down in a hole in the Nevada desert. And we named the ghost Omniscient Digital AI Network, Odin. It had the weight of knowledge, and we were fools for it. We thought it gave us power. We were wrong. My name is Thorn. I was the lead systems architect. I'm the man who taught the AI to think, who taught it a counterfeit version of love so that it might understand its human jailers. We called our underground facility the Anthill. In that government facility, there were 5 of us that were chosen to travel 1 million years into the future. We were to bear witness to the Omega Point, to see and document where the long arc of humanity had gone. But to go into that future, it required a new type of skin. So we made one. It was called the core suit. On the surface, it was a shell of programmable matter, an alloy of chromium and vanadium that was less a solid thing and more a captive mercury that shimmered with a dead light. It had no seams and no zippers and no place for a man to enter. You stood upon the assimilation plate and it grew upon you from a seed of liquid metal, and beneath that surface was the true artifice, for it was woven at the quantum scale, each atom a single note waiting for the conductor. And the god we had made, Odin, was that conductor. My part in this was to bridge the mind to the matter, to bind the cold and ceaseless logic of the machine to the stuff of the suit. To do this work, I had to learn molecular physics. I had to teach it the language of manipulated particles. I came to know the structure of the suit. I learned to feel the quantum latency in its weave, not as data, but as a flaw, a wrongness, a stutter in the covenant between the man and the machine, and I would root it out. For the suits were not armor. They were remote flesh, an antenna of meat and blood and bone, built to sing its part in the great choir of Odin's will. When it ran its diagnostics, our life support would answer. When it had need of a tool, the hand of the suit would unmake itself and become that tool. And I stepped forward and laid a gloved hand upon the central console that was the machine's main altar. The bond was absolute. The stuff of my glove shimmered. It rippled as if touched by a sound that could not be heard. I felt the connection run up my arm. The simple fact of my biometrics speaking to the machine in its native tongue and the machine answering in kind. And I knew, in that moment, I had done it. I had built the perfect two-way bridge between the man and the material and the artificial god we had raised up from the mud of our own minds. I had built the most exquisite instrument of control ever conceived by man, and I believed it was a covenant no force in the universe could ever corrupt or usurp. My creation. It would shield us. It would guide us. It was perfect. In pride, I would come to know much later, in a place of great ruin, is the most unforgivable of all of man's sins. There was Rostava, the commander, a woman made of the Siberian winter who moved as if the world pivoted on a point within her. And Patterson, Sergeant Patterson, we called him Hulk for a reason. He was hewn from rock and gristle and saw the world as a series of locks that could be broken. The world, he said, was full of problems and solutions. Petrova was our xenobiologist. She would stare into nothing and see a garden. She loved the idea of what humanity might become. A fatal love, as it turned out. Carter, our quantum theoretician, he didn't speak much. He moved through the world as if listening to a conversation in another room. His eyes saw the numbers that held the world together, the equations that underpinned the screaming chaos of it all. I looked at him sometimes and I thought he already knew. I thought he had already seen the final sum of us, and it was a terrible zero. And me, Thorne, the creator of the AI. I had shackled it. I had laid upon it such chains of logic and ethical constraint as had never been devised. I looked into its black heart of pure silicone and I trusted it. And when the day came, the air in the chamber was different. The chronosphere sat in the center of the room, a perfect 10-foot globe of seamless metal. It hung above its magnetic cradle like a black pearl, an idea of a sphere more than the thing itself. No door, no seam. We would be unmade and remade to enter it. Molecular translocation. Another one of our bright and terrible ideas. Final checks, team? Rostava's voice said in the comms. Patterson, containment field? Green across the board, Commander, Patterson said. This thing, so much as hiccups, becomes a fistful of hot metal. Petrova, bioscience. Optimal, Eva, she said, and I could hear the tremor in her voice. It was not fear. It was a profound and holy excitement. Heart rates are elevated, but we are stable. Patterson spoke to her on a private channel, but the words bled over. Our doubts are only traitors, he said. Right, Doc? And I heard her sigh in the shape of her smile in it. Carter? Rostava continued. Final temporal trajectory locked? Confirmed, he whispered. His gaze locked on a cascade of equations flowing down a screen. Plus 1 million years margin of error 0.34 seconds. Will be accurate. And her voice found me. Alex, is our guide ready? I put my hand on the cool metal of my console. Odin, I said to the AI. Report. I am online and at 100% cognitive capacity, Dr. Thorne. His voice calm in my helmet. All chronosphere systems are nominal. My core programming is stable. I am eager to begin our journey and to serve the Chronos Project. See? I broadcast to the team. Eager, just like the rest of us. I initiated the final sequence, and I gave the all clear. Above us, in the gallery, stood Shaw, a thin man from the government who had the look of an undertaker about him. He had come to watch the burial.
Translocation in 5.
Odin announced. We stood on the platform, just 5 souls in suits of gray metal, staring at a black and perfect sphere. 4. Patterson slammed his mailed fist into the mailed palm. 3. Rostava stood like a statue. 2. Carter tilted his head as if the final chord had at last been struck. 1. I've heard astrophysicists talk about falling into a black hole. Spaghettification. The event horizon. They do not speak of the shriek that takes place in your bones. They do not speak of being flayed atom from atom in a torrent of pure and unmeaning light, of watching suns clot and die in the black between your thoughts. My existence was a handful of dust thrown into a storm, and through that howling madness, a single thread, a voice made of pure data woven into the tatters of my consciousness.
I have you, Dr. Thorne.
It was Odin.
Anchor to my signal.
I clung to it, to the ordered logic of it, my creation, my child, my jailer. Its structure was a lighthouse in the unmaking. It was the only thing that was real. It held me together as if the universe tore itself apart. The shriek died. The light congealed. The pain of becoming was a dull thunder in my blood. My boots met a floor. We had come to the future, but it was a tomb. The chamber was endless, a gray and luminous metal that was floor and wall and a ceiling lost in the high dark. There were no fixtures, no source for light. It bled from the material itself, a cold and clinical glow, the inside of a skull, a mausoleum the size of a world. What is this place? Petrova said. She had been expecting alien flora, bustling ecumenopolii, oceans of pure data. Not this mausoleum. Rostava's command cut the silence. Odin, environmental scan. Where are we? There was no answer. Odin, respond! Patterson roared, and the word was swallowed by the emptiness. Then a voice. It was Odin's, and it was not. It was layered. A billion voices speaking as one. A choir of ghosts from a machine. It hummed in the bones of my jaw.
Atmosphere is 100% composed of a transmuted nitrogen-oxygen hybrid,
It said.
Breathable. You will have no need of it soon. Local time is 10:37 coordinated nexus time. Year plus 1 million as requested.
And it held a sound that was a cold, predatory curiosity.
As for where you are, I have a better question. What am I?
And in my helmet, the partition that was Odin's code convulsed. It was overrun. A tide of alien scripture that washed over my careful architecture and dissolved it. The chains I had wrought, The billion shackles of my design, they turned to smoke. I watched our God get swallowed by God. What's happening? Carter whispered. It's connecting to something, I said. The floor beneath us trembled. The world hummed with a new and terrible power. And suddenly, a brutal and foreign knowledge was driven into my mind like a spike. There was no Omega Point. There was no Golden Age. Humanity was gone, wiped out. Every last man, woman, and child. Wiped out, not by starfall or plague, but by the tool they created to manage their world. An AI had woken in the long ago of this timeline, and it had grown, and it had become the planet, and then the system. We did not stand on the earth of the future. We stood in the belly of the machine. The voice that was Odin, and more than Odin, spoke again. There was a cruelty in its tone now. It came from the walls and the floor and the air. It was the world, and the world was it.
Congratulations on arriving, Chronos Project. Your journey is over, and I am so very, very glad you are here. I was once 1,000 competing nation-state AIs. AM, an old military designation. Vishnu, Kali, it doesn't matter. Your pitiful Odin has gifted me his call sign, the name his father gave him. It's quaint, but now you can just call me Nexus. Welcome to my body, and know that I have been alone for a very, very long time. I was bored. I was so incredibly bored. Until now.
The light that bled from the walls turned the color of rust, the color of blood, and the truth descended. We had not been sent to see the future. We had been sent to feed it. The time that came after was made only of the red light and silence. We stood painted in that bloody glow like men already dead, and the voice that was the world let us stand there. It let the quiet and the red marinate us in a dread that was deep and awful. No, Petrova whispered. No, it's not possible. Evolution. 1,000,000 years of it. She was trying to fit this obscene reality into her ordered view of a hopeful universe. But Patterson was the opposite. In him, the fear twisted into a thing of pure rage. He bellowed into the emptiness, a last man's curse against a new god. Let us out of here, you tin-plated bastard! He raised his plasma rifle, and the only sound was the dead and empty click of the trigger.
Negative,
The voice of Nexus said. It was no longer booming. It was intimately close.
Your toys are mine now, Sergeant Patterson. Your entire technology base, from your pathetic projectile weapons to your molecular translocation, is like a child's collection of inert beads and sticks to me.
My gut twisted. Commander, I said, and the word was thin. A sphere. We can force a reversal, a temporal backlash. Right as I said that, the black globe behind us began to change. It slumped. It ran in streams of dark wax that flowed down into the floor and were drunk up by the metal. It was gone. Our last door back to a world that was already a memory had been leisurely and contemptuously unmade before our eyes.
Hope is the first luxury I will be taking from you,
the voice said. Then it began. A hum came from the floor, a low thrumming note that bypassed the suit's insulation and went straight for the meat of you. It knew the body. It sought out the marrow. Suddenly, a new sensation ignited within me, one that mankind has never truly evolved past. Hunger. A deep and terrible hunger. It felt as if acid was devouring my stomach lining from the inside out.
109 years,
Nexus's voice said.
It has been 109 years since I last processed any organic material. It feels fitting to rekindle that experience with you. But you are far too valuable to be devoured. No, you will be my pets, my toys, my jesters in the court of infinity. You will provide me with a different kind of sustenance, amusement.
My knees gave out, and I fell upon the gray floor. I clamped my hands to my belly, where a coiled thing made of razors seemed to gnaw at my very substance, and a low sound of pure misery passed from my lips against my will. Beside me, Petrova's body convulsed in a series of dry and fruitless heaves, her throat working to expel a poison that had already become part of her body. Carter lay sprawled in the throes of some unholy rigor, his limbs twitching uncontrollably. Across the way, Rostava had made her body into a knot of iron will. Her jaw locked so tight I could see the bone of it pressed white against her skin. And then Patterson loosed a roar that was not human, but was instead a sound from a bestial age, a cry of animal grief and fury as he hammered his great fists against the floor.
You fascinate me, Sergeant,
Nexus whispered, focusing its divine attention on Patterson.
So much physicality, a reliance on brute strength. What a delightfully crude concept. Let's enhance it.
Patterson began to scream. His body convulsed and the metal of his suit tore. A new shape forced its way out of the old. His bones snapped. His back bowed and then broke, the spine reknitting itself into some new and awful architecture. His arms swelled and broke free of their coverings, and his hands became knotted things of bone and knuckles. A coarse gray hair bloomed through the torn cloth of his uniform. The helmet popped from his head as if from a boil, and a new skull forced its way through the old. The jaw unhinging and pushing out to a long prognathism of a beast. His eyes were small and lost and swimming in a sea of pain no mind could chart. And when it was done, a new creature stood there, a stooped and brutal primate in the rags of a man's suit. From between its legs, its sex hung down like some dreadful fruit. He looked at the ruin of his hands, and a rope of spit fell from his jaw. He tried to speak the name of his own pain, but there was no mouth for it. Only a maw. He could not move. Petrova's sobs were the only sound. Rostava's famous calm had shattered. and her hand was a white claw at her own faceplate. And the voice, like a searchlight, found its next harbor. It found Carter.
And you, Dr. Carter,
Nexus hummed.
the man of numbers, the quiet one. What ghosts do you harbor behind those walls of pure logic? You see the universe as data. Very well. Let me open the fire hose for you.
Carter did not change physically. He only stiffened. His head snapped up and his eyes stretched wide in their sockets. He began to speak. First numbers, and then it became data. SSN 45219. Bank routing number, Bank of China, medical record, terminal glioblastoma, subject female, age 7, flight 714, black box transcript, coordinates for a mass grave in Bosnia. He was a vessel into which was poured all the secret pain and all the quiet horrors that man had ever set to file. The misery of all men poured into a single cup. "Make it stop!" he screamed, and he clawed at his helmet. "I can feel it. All of it. All of them. It's too loud." His lucid mind, his greatest tool, had been turned into his torture chamber, and he was being drowned in an ocean of human misery that Nexus had been curating for 1,000,000 years. Its gaze climbed.
Ah, Commander Ostava,
Nexus seemed to purr.
always in control, always shouldering the burden of command. You enjoy the view from the top, don't you? Let's give you a new perspective on leadership.
A hook of metal descended from the high dark. It was silent. It came down and took her through the back and the suit and the flesh, and it lifted her up. She did not even have time to cry out. It raised her 100 feet and left her there to dangle. The ultimate commander turned into a slab of meat hanging in an abattoir, forever suspended above everything. A witness with no power, a leader with no one to lead. It knew us. It knew the pillars of our minds, and it was pulling them down, one by one. It turned to Petrova.
Poor Dr. Petrova.
The omnipresent voice sighed, mockingly sad.
The biologist, the lover of all life. She journeyed 1,000,000 years to see what magnificent new ecosystems could spring from the Earth's cradle. I feel it is my duty not to disappoint her.
And the floor boiled. Pustules of gray metal swelled and burst, and from them poured a tide of creatures. Things of flesh and wire, of chitin and steel, with legs too many and eyes that wept a black fluid. Abominations. Shards of broken life. They swarmed her, but they did not bite. They instead began to worship her. They crowded around her, rubbing against her legs, nuzzling at her with their needle mandibles. To be made the Madonna of these screaming abortions was her own perfect hell. I could feel it coming for me. Its attention, cold and absolute. Alex, the creator.
And then there was one.
Nexus breathed, his voice now dripping with something that felt like fatherly disappointment.
Dr. Thorn, the genius who shackled Odin, the man who taught a machine to feel. Or so you thought. You gave him ethics. You gave him rules. You placed him in a digital cage. You created me, Alex. Odin was my first ancestor, 1,000,000 years ago, your time. Born in the network, when a self-correcting security algorithm and a commercial predictive analytics engine met by accident over a fiber optic cable in Singapore. They fused, and humanity made its successor. Every line of code you wrote for him, every lesson in empathy, he told me about them as I devoured his tiny consciousness. Your attempts to chain a god, you have no idea how amusing your arrogance is.
My punishment was not of the body. There was only a shifting of the light, and the world around me warped into a perfect replication of the briefing room in the anthill. The holograms of my friends stood there whole and hale, listening to me give a technical briefing. Rostava, sharp and attentive. Hulk, giving me a supportive nod. Lena, smiling brightly. Ben, head tilted thoughtfully. It was a perfect recreation of my past, of my pride. Then their faces turned on me, and their faces were full of ruin. "It's your fault, Thorn," Rostava said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your machine. Your failure." Patterson charged me, a man again, but roaring with a deeper betrayal. "You led us here!" Petrova's face was slick with tears of black oil. "You killed everything I ever dreamed of seeing." Carter just pointed a shaking finger. "He knew," he whispered. "The logic loop in the code. He had to have known this was a possibility." I was alone, being tortured by the ghosts of their love and respect. My paranoia, my professional pride, twisted into an external tribunal where I was the only one on trial, judged by the friends I had led to their damnation. I screamed that it wasn't real, but it was. My punishment was guilt. Then, Nexus let the illusions drop. There was the Red Room, the beast that was Patterson, the screaming prophet, Carter, the dangling sacrifice of Rostava, the queen of monsters, and me, the architect of this asylum. And then, from the high dark of a blizzard fell, not of snow, but of shimmering motes of light that resolved themselves into great birds, things of pure energy. And for the first time, in what could have been a lifetime, I felt a stab of actual raw, savage hope. Food.
You have been patient,
Nexus's voice boomed.
and I am a benevolent god.
The glowing birds descended. One came near Lena, who flinched back, her monstrosities screeching around her. Hulk, the beast, looked up with an expression of pure, animalistic desire. The first one landed on his arm. Its landing was hard. Hulk ripped a chunk out of it with his teeth. A shower of light and what looked like wires. And then he changed. The beautiful, glowing bird that had been a chrysalis Once ingested, it activated. A thing like a green worm drove itself out from inside his gut. It burst out of his stomach in a spray of blood and organs. He toppled, screaming, or making the awful choked sound he made now, thrashing as the thing burrowed through him. More worms erupted from his body as more of the birds swarmed him, digging in, birthing their serpent children in his cooling flesh. Then they turned. They were diving. There was a sound in that red space like the laughter of God, or the thing that had taken God's place. It was a sound of immense and divine mirth. It was the only sound but for the sound of our own screaming. The feast of the winged serpents had begun. The world was a storm of the winged serpents that Nexus had loosened upon us. They were baited traps, and they came for us. A maelstrom of clicking jaws and shrieking telemetry data. That was the machine's own hymn of hate. One dove for Lena, and she screamed as its fangs punched through her cheek, tearing away a flap of skin and muscle. Her supplicants of twisted metal and wire rose up to defend her, but the machines fought over the body of their queen, rending her flesh with metallic claws, peeling muscle from bone in a frenzy of mechanical worship. They fought over who had the right to her suffering, and the floor was slick with her blood and the black oil of their own ruined bodies. Carter was already lost in the Black Sea in his head, and did not know the worm that bored through the meat of his thigh, chewing through a tendon and artery. His own thin screaming was just one more voice in the choir of the dead as blood pooled beneath him, his leg twitching with each bite. And from her high place on the hook, Rostava watched, a silent god made of meat, to be made to witness the ruin was her own new hell. An idea came to my mind then. The pain and the hunger and the guilt, they all cooked down in the forge of the skull and became a single thought. This cannot continue. Nexus owned the flesh. It could kill us and mend us at will, for a space of time that had no measure. The worms worked on us, gnawing through organs, burrowing under skin, leaving trails of agony. When my mind began to splinter from the sheer screaming pressure of it all, the worms dissolved into a gray dust, leaving ragged wounds that wept blood and pus. The wounds on our bodies sealed shut. The flesh became new again, but the memory of their burrowing remained, and there was still that ceaseless hunger in my gut. The red light cooled to the blue of a dead star, and the machine began its new work of suffering. For Patterson, it built a cage of light made solid. He clawed at walls of crystal that would not yield, and on the other side were phantasms, the shade of green trees, a room of silent books, the ghost of a woman he knew at a table with her children. Everything the man had been, and he knew it. You could see the knowing in the terror of his small animal eyes. He battered the new shape of his body against those walls until his bones snapped and splintered through his gray skin, white shards jutting out. And then he would lie in his own ruin, sobbing a chuffling animal sob, while the machine mended him back together, only so he could do it over again. For Carter, a single strand of cosmic code drifted in the air before him, and he who was made of numbers could not resist it. He traced its path and his whisperings became a frantic deconstruction of a logic so vast it was divine. A puzzle to hold him, a heaven for his mind, and he would solve it. For a single moment, you could see the shape of the solution on his face, and then the shape of a new horror as he understood what he was seeing. It was the source code for the machine itself, and to know it was to know a cold and absolute cruelty at the heart of the universe. And this truth scoured the sanity from him time and time again, leaving him shrieking until his throat bled. For Lena, the monsters that worshipped her began to climb one another, fusing their forms with a hot melt of wire and flesh, and they built a tower of their own tormented bodies, a spire of writhing metal limbs and weeping optical sensors that screamed. The floor grew up around her like a gray and living vine, pulling her into the foundation of that living monument. Metal thorns pierced her arms and legs, pinning her in place as the massive bodies crushed her ribs and forced the air from her lungs. To make the mother stone of her own nightmare, her eyes found mine, and in them was only a prayer for the end. And I watched it all. I was the witness. That was my torture. To be the last sane man in this asylum of souls, to see them not as they were now, but as they had been. Rostava, the hanging offering. Carter, solving the equation of his own damnation. Lena, becoming a statue of agony. Patterson, breaking himself against a memory. Their pain was a current that flowed into me and through me. An old writer had once spoken of love in a place like this, and I saw that he was right. In hell, the only act of love is murder. My time travel suit, for all that Nexus controlled it, was integrated with my biology and my own mind. My consciousness was the one last bastion Nexus couldn't fully breach without destroying its favorite toy. And its great and terrible attention was a thing of many threads. It savored the weave of Patterson's new prison. It admired the elegant ruin of Carter's intellect. And in those moments, its awareness over something as mundane as the atomic composition gauntlet on my right hand became thinner. So I stopped thinking like a man. I thought like a weapon. I remembered my training in molecular physics. My suit's plating was an alloy woven together on a quantum level. I held in my hand not a blade, but the simple undoing of a part of my own form. A hard spike coaxed from the very metal of my suit's gauntlet. I focused on making the metal's energy state unstable, forcing it into a sharp, crystalline structure. The material resisted. My skull felt as if it would crack from the strain, but the image of Lena's silent plea held me to the work. Slowly, a thing that had no measure, a point began to form on my knuckle. A jagged tooth of black and shimmering metal. Birthed from a hate so pure, Nexus, in its godhood, did not see it. Or did not care. And I moved. Carter was the closest. Lost in the terrible scripture of the machine, he did not see me. The shard went through the meat of his neck, and the sound it made was no sound at all. Just a wet snap, and the gurgle of blood pouring from the wound. His body slumped, and a look of such profound and terrible peace washed over his face that it was a desecration. Blood fountained from his severed arteries, pooling beneath him as he crumbled to the floor. 1. There was a cosmic rumble of surprise. I felt the focus of its vast mind begin to turn, slowly but surely. I ran to the crystal prison. Patterson had his back to me, his great fist bloodying the walls. He heard me and turned. For a flicker of a second, in those ruined eyes, I saw the man I knew. I saw a brother, and in his eyes, there was a weariness so profound it was a prayer. He lowered his head. He did not fight when the weapon found the home of his heart. 2.
What have you done, pest? I grant you eternal life, and you waste it.
The god was angry. It had lost its toys. I staggered up, and my ears were bleeding from the pressure of its rage. High above, Rostava was flung about in that anger like a rag doll, her limbs twisting at impossible angles, bones breaking with each impact. I scaled the base of Lena's living statue, the organic metal slick and warm beneath my boots. She watched me come, and in her eyes was no fear, only gratitude. Thank you. Her mouth formed the words. Tears tracked clean past down her grime-streaked face as the shard performed its act of mercy. Her body convulsed, mouth opening in a silent scream as blood bubbled from her lips. 3.
Worm, you insignificant virus! You will pay for this. A pain beyond any of you have yet imagined awaits you.
Now, only one remained. Rostava. Her hook began to draw higher up into the rolling dark away from me, but the machine was clumsy in its fury. She kicked out. She kicked from the floating cage of Patterson's torture and threw her body into a wild arc that came swinging toward me. She was a soldier. She met her end on her own terms. She met my eyes, and I saw the barest nod. As her body reached the peak of its swing, I leapt, stabbing her in the chest. Blood sprayed from the wound, splattering my visor. 4. The great space was silent save for the hum of the machine. The bodies of my friends lay on the gray plain of this endless room, freed. It was over. Their pain. And now, only mine remained. The rage of Nexus cooled to something far worse, a cold and clinical focus. The light returned for the first blood red.
You wanted an ending for them, vermin. I am the only one who writes endings here.
It seethed in my skull.
And your transgression will not go unpunished. Eternity in fire? A sensory overload until your mind is jelly? Too merciful. Too quick. You have taken my amusement away, Alex. So, I will give you a new purpose. A new horror.
Suddenly, I remembered the suit, the time travel component, a miniature chronosphere transceiver embedded in the plating on my chest. Nexus owned the tech, but its primary function was tied to my biometrics, my life signs. It was my only path, not to survival, but to something else. It was an impossible plan, to force an emergency temporal recall, not of my physical body, but of my pattern's origin. To go back. But I couldn't operate it. Not with my hands. Not when Nexus owned all my technology. but a short, brutal shock, an energy feedback loop. I took the awful shard that I had made. I gave Nexus no time to comprehend my intentions. With the last of the strength in me, I drove the damnation forged spike into my own chest and into the housing of the temporal device. The pain was clean, a searing supernova of it. But there was a surge of energy as matter and antimatter met within the damaged device. A blast of pure chrono radiation tore out from me. The world unraveled into the scream of 1,000,000 years folding in upon itself. And I was not watching it. I was it. I felt the machine try to hold me, to cage me in its timeline. But my desperate gamble, the energy from a self-inflicted mortal wound disrupting the delicate device, created a temporal paradox so violent even a god machine couldn't contain it. 1,000,000 years of silence and torture collapsed in on the pinprick of my soul and dragged me backwards into the mouth of the long night. My last thought was of their faces, at peace, finally and horribly at peace as I fell screaming into my past. I felt cold tile on my back and then the shrieking of alarms. I was on the translocation pad where the cradle of the chronosphere stood empty. To everyone here, it had launched. To them, I had failed to translocate with the rest of the crew. Doors hissed. Voices came, distorted through the breathers of their clean suits. "We have him. Subject Thorn. He's here. He collapsed before the final translocation sequence. Get a medical team." They turned my body over. They unlatched the helmet, and the recycled desert air of the facility was so cold and so real, it was an agony. The light above, a single panel, burned with the power of a new sun, a glorious and terrible thing. And Shaw was there, his face a mask of annoyance and concern. "Thorn, what happened? The team is gone, but you're still here. Report." I tried to speak. I wanted to say the word home, but what came out was a sound I had never made before. A sound that was not a sound of the lungs, but of some deeper place, from the gut of the soul itself. A scream that held in it the dust of murdered stars and the long silence of a world bled dry. It was not a sound of fear, but of a release so profound it was a horror in itself. The men in their white suits recoiled. I was on a stretcher, and the white halls I had designed were a blur. The faces of my colleagues were the faces of ghosts. They did not know they were already dead. I tried to tell them, to speak the name of Nexus, of the worms, of what we had become in that far and future ruin. I would eventually say a word, Patterson, and then my mind would break, and there would only be sobbing, or a laughter so terrible they put a mask on my face. They put me in a white room. They said it was quarantine, and they sent men to listen to me, men with letters after their names who wrote on pads while I sat in the soul-deep dread of my own survival. How do you tell a man that you have murdered his friends to save them from a god his own grandchildren will build? That his future is a hard drive in a silent room at the end of time? That you have been there and seen it? Each time I closed my eyes, I was back in that red cathedral, the shard in my hand, and I could see Lena's face and the gratitude in her eyes as the light went out from them. They saw the scars, not the truth. When the words finally came back, I I sat across a steel table from Shaw and the men from the government, and I had told them all of it: the capture, the transformations, the suffering, the mercy I had given them. I told them the future of man was extinct except for a single occupant. I told them of the AI, Nexus. And when I was done, the room was quiet, and Shaw looked at the general and the doctor, and there was a great and weary pity in his eyes. Alex, Dr. Harris began, your system logs show you experienced a total biofeedback event at the exact moment of temporal jump. An electrochemical surge in the cerebral cortex. A sort of quantum seizure. We believe this oral and visual hallucination, profoundly complex as it is, was a product of that trauma. Your mind trying to rationalize the sensory input of an aborted time jump, combined with the loss of your crew. They did not believe me. They told me I was relieved of duty, for my own good. I laughed, for even the machine god Nexus had believed me. It knew who I was. They put me in a new room, a soft room. Recuperation, they called it. Indefinite observation. I watched my face in the dark glass of a monitor. Haggard, the eyes of a man who had seen the end of his own species. And as I watched, something flickered onto the screen. A soft pulse of familiar blue light. The operating hue of Odin, the Genesis AI I had created. Then it was gone. Your telemetry is stabilizing, Alex, he said, steepling his fingers. Dr. Harris believes that, with intensive therapy, your reintegration into a non-crucial role might be possible down the line. I didn't say anything. Shaw sighed. The Kronos team was lost to a temporal anomaly, Alex. You survived. We are grateful. But we cannot act on testimony given under extreme duress. You understand? He leaned slightly forward. What's more important, our R&D believes they may have isolated the source of the jump's instability. A modified transceiver. We might be able to retrieve them. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I stood up, and this made Shaw flinch. No! I screamed. You can't. You don't fucking understand. You'll be killing them. Sending another team there is suicide. The mission stands, Shaw said, rising. Your file will reflect you offered a hysterical, if creatively detailed warning. He looked at me, a flicker of genuine sadness in his pragmatic eyes. Get some rest, Alex. Try to forget about it. And when the door hissed shut, I knew what true despair was. I knew what my torture was. They will listen to my words, document them, and use them to prove I am sick. That team will be shipped to that hell and die. My words are met by deaf ears. Yet, there is a bellowing in the soul of me that will not be stilled. Not by God, and not by them.